So, blacks choosing sides. My name is Edward Hector, my friends. You can call me Ned. I'm one of many black soldiers that fight in the American Revolution. I am with Proctor's 3rd Pennsylvania Artillery, later to be called the 4th Continental Artillery. I am a Teamster and I am a bombardier. For those who are unfamiliar with those terms, as a Teamster, I drive a wagon and a team of horses. In fact, I'm a very specialized Teamster. There are baggage Teamsters that transport goods, supplies, tents, etc. And then there are artillery Teamsters. I am an artillery Teamster. I transport gunpowder, ammunition. In fact, behind my wagon, I'm pulling one of the cannons. And as a bombardier, I man one of the 3 rear positions of the gun. After I've got the gun in place and loaded up the ammunition box, I fall into one of those 3 rear positions and help to fire the gun. So I fought in the Battle of Brandywine and the Battle of Germantown. And in the Battle of Brandywine, well, some people considered something I did as being on the heroic side. I had my reasons for doing it. That was saving my wagon and my horses when our hill was overran by the Redcoats. But, you know, there's a lot to that story. Maybe one day I might have the pleasure of sharing that with you. Approximately 3,000 to 5,000 people of color served the American cause. 7,000 to 10,000 serve on the British side. Oh, are you surprised by that? That there's twice as many people of color who are serving on the British side? Well, let me see if I can help you to understand that a little bit better. I'm going to do something to you. It won't hurt. It won't hurt. Hold on. Ha! Did you feel it? Good. Do you know what I just did to you? Oh, probably not. Well, what I just did was I turned you all into black enslaved people. Whoa, whoa. Before you start making plans to come over here and beat me up, let me explain. I want you to stand in their shoes. I want you to see through their eyes. I want you to think with their minds. So with that, I believe we're ready to begin. Now that we all are black here, mind if I ask you a question? Do you really care what white master rules over you, whether it's the white Americans or the white British? I think you probably don't, because you're still a what? You're still a slave. But do you care about being on the winning side? I thought so. Because do you know what we call the losing side? I mean, besides losers, we call them traitors. And do you know what we do to a traitor? Yes, you execute them. So I take it that you don't want to be on the losing side. Am I right? I don't think anybody does. Okay, good. When Washington would take over his army in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he would be in for a big surprise. As he was about to inspect his men, or as he was inspecting his men, he noticed something, or shall I say, someone's. He sees people like me. And my friends, what am I? What obviously am I? Yes, I am a black man. Yeah, you could say black man. That's fine. Black is not a bad term. So why does this bother him that he's seeing so many black people in his ranks? Is it that he's never seen a black person before or an African before? On the contrary, by the end of his life, he would own over 300 slaves working his various property. So what's the problem? What do these blacks that are in his ranks have that the slaves do not? Can you guess? Yes, they're armed. These are fighting black people. They're soldiers. So why does that bother him? I mean, isn't that what you want in the army? You want men that will fight, right? So what is the problem? Well, he's probably thinking, what are they going to do with those guns, and who are they going to shoot? Yes, I did say it bothered him. You're probably wondering, well, how do I know that it bothered him? Well, you can go and ask me the question. How do I know? Well, thank you for asking. I know that it bothered him because shortly after, he issues orders, and they basically state there will not be allowed any blacks in the Continental Army, neither slave or free. My goodness. Did you hear that order? Can you believe that? He doesn't want us in his army. I mean, my fellow blacks, how do you feel about that? Are you as offended as I am about this? I mean, after all, we blacks have been fighting from the beginning of the war. You, my friend, Robert. Oh yes, you and I, we were fighting in the beginning. We were there. We were at Lexington, Concord, Breeds Hill, Bunker Hill. We're already fighting and dying for this cause of freedom. And now this general doesn't want us to fight. This general who's just now coming into the battle. And you know, it's curious. We have been even fighting from the beginning of the war. We were there way before it started. Oh, wait a minute. We have some Bostonians out, some people from Massachusetts. Yes, you Bostonians. Yes. Oh, by the way, may I tell you what an amazing thing you did? Oh, just utterly brilliant. I mean, dress up like natives, board the ships, hack open the tea, dump it in the harbor. Incredible. But not quite everybody was as pleased as we were about it. I understand His Majesty was quite put off, but I understand you really don't care about what he thinks. Am I correct? Oh, yeah, I see your head's going like this. You don't really care, do you? So, that is a problem because His Majesty decides to take action. He sends soldiers over to guard us. Let me explain what I mean by guard. I don't mean guard like this. I mean guard like this. You like being guarded like that? I didn't think so. You know what else I heard? I heard that there's one of you, person from Massachusetts there. Yes. I heard that you got some of your friends and neighbors together one night, and y'all confronted the redcoats out on the town square. Suddenly, you hear the sound of shots, and when the smoke clears, 5 lay dead, one of which is a black man named Crispus Attucks, one of the first to die in the cause. Not in the war yet, because the war wouldn't start till about 5 years later. So, you see, even before the war starts, we're out fighting and dying for this cause of independence. Well, tell me, are you as offended as I am? Do you feel as strongly as I do about this? Tell you what, why don't you go with me and let's complain to the powers that be about it. Of course, you know that we might get beaten for this. You still with me? All right, good. I'll be proud to fight alongside of you any day. Excellent. So we go and complain about it. And believe it or not, General Washington changes his orders. He says that he will allow free blacks to fight in this army. Nonetheless, still runaway slaves are slipping into the army. And tell me, why do you think a slave would even want to get in the army to start with? Well, there's an old tradition that goes back to the Greek and Roman times. They have a slave fight for his country. That slave is normally given his freedom. In fact, you may see on some of the people at the Washington's Crossing a red conical hat. It's called a liberty cap. During the Greek Roman time, they would give that to the slave that was liberated to show that he had earned his freedom. And so that symbol continued even during our time. So the we continue to take and go and fight, and we complain, and General changes his orders. Speaking of some of us who are in the Army, I've noticed in your time, you have a habit of kind of painting us, all of us blacks, with a real broad brush. You could actually be black and be in the Army in at least 4 different types of way. You could be a free black. I'm a free black. You could be a runaway slave that's hiding out in the Army and again, hoping to gain your freedom at the end of the war. You could be sent as a substitute that was sent in place of your master or your master's son. Or you could have come from outside the country. Yes, there are some blacks that are coming from outside of our country. In fact, they came with the French from Haiti, and they fought in the Battle of Savannah and the Battle of Charleston. And all 4 of them could have totally different reasons for fighting. So our reasons for being in the Army can be as diverse as you people are in your time. So, but I really don't think that General Washington changed his orders because we were complaining. Do you think? Nah. But you know what he might be thinking? He might be thinking that I can have these people fighting for me or against me. So he changes that order. That's curious, because down south, there is another person making a proclamation. His name is Lord Dunsmore, John Murray, the governor of Virginia. He's made his declaration, and it is this. I think it's called the Phillipsburg Declaration. All slaves belonging to rebels in Virginia, if you will rise up and fight for the crown, you will be given your freedom. Now tell me, how did that sound to you? You like the sound of that? Well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And let's think about this. Let's see. Let's look at the American soldier. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures. I wish I could draw. I should have put some pictures in. But if you could see us, many of us, especially the militia, is a pretty motley looking crew. I mean, after all, we are farmers. We're merchants. We're not well-trained soldiers. Oh, I want you to know we are brave men. We are willing to, if necessity dictates, to fight and to die for our families, for our country, for our homes. But we're not well-trained soldiers. However, the British, are they well-led, well-supplied? They're one of the best armies in the world. Come on. Who do you think's really going to win in a battle between Great Britain and a bunch of colonists? Who do you really think's going to win? Pretend that you don't really know what the outcome of the war was or is. What side do you think you might pick to win in this conflict? Well, are you starting to get an idea now why twice as many of our people are now fighting on the British side as fighting on the American side? But imagine the surprise. Imagine the surprise when it didn't turn out that way. And when some way we raggedy Americans managed to actually win this war. Oops. The ones that went over to the British side, ooh, you're in a bad situation now, because now you are traitors and you know what we're going to do to you. Remember that neighbor there that was eyeing your land that you had? He's finally got his excuse now to seize your farm. And you, if you're lucky, maybe you might be able to make it over to Canada before they get a hold of you. The British? Is it that the British love you so dearly? No, I don't really think so. Um, do they take you home with them? No. If I would ask one of you Brits that's over in London after the war, do you want all these black people coming over, taking your jobs? No. So what's the solution? Well, I'll give you credit. You kept your word. You freed a lot of the blacks that you had that had came and fought alongside with you. But your solution is to send them to places like Canada or Nova Scotia. I don't know how to tell you this, but we blacks are not native to Nova Scotia. No. Cold, wet, rocky, horrible place for us to be. Eventually, the British send some ships over to Nova Scotia. They have just opened up a new colony down in Africa, Sierra Leone, and they're now making us an offer. If you want to, we would take you down to Africa, take you back to Africa. Sound like a great idea, hmm? Or is it? Well, there's a lot of them that take him up on that offer, and he takes a lot of the blacks that were in Nova Scotia down to Sierra Leone. Now I've got to ask you a question. When they get off of the ships and they start building their settlement and such, are they building their huts like the Africans built them? No. Are they eating the foods probably as like the Africans eat? Probably not. Are they acting like the Africans act? You see, by ethnicity, yes, they are Africans. However, by culturalization, they're Americans. And how do you think these Africans feel about having these strange people with their strange ways coming over into their land? You think that they like that? So this idea that may have sounded so great to many really didn't pan out as well as many would have supposed it would have. So there you have it. I think now you kind of got a grip on why so many of our people are fighting for the British side. Oh, excuse me, before I forget. I want to make sure I change you back. I don't want people talking about you when you leave this presentation. So I want to continue to tell you a little bit more in context about the blacks that were in America. As I started off telling you, 3,000 to 5,000 served the American cause, 7,000 to 10,000 served the British. Did you know that General Washington would end up commanding one of the most integrated armies all the way up until 1948, when Harry S. Truman would finally reintegrate the army for Korea? Not only that, General Washington also would command at least 3 majority black regiments, or at least largely black regiments. One from Massachusetts, one from Rhode Island, and as I told you, there was a group that came in with the French from Haiti. And they will play an important part in our struggle for independence. If I might, may I kind of share with you at least some of the points that made them so important? Good, thank you. Up in New York, the battle's not going well at all. We're losing every last engagement with the British. We're getting pushed back, actually southward, down through New York until finally our backs are up against the river. We are trapped. The next day, the British are going to close in. They're going to annihilate this army. They're going to capture this traitor Washington. And that's going to be the end of our fight for independence. I mean, done, over with, finished completely. But under the cover of night and fog, under the very nose of the British warships that were anchored in that harbor, men row their boats up. They load the army into the boats. They take them across the river. Some make that trip as many as 11 times that night. What you don't know is that many of those men who are rowing those boats are black sailors from Marblehead, Massachusetts. That night, these men save our revolution. Like I said, it could have all been over with right then and right there. There's going to be another battle that's going to come down the pike. The Battle of Yorktown. Oh, by the way, the Battle of Yorktown. Before I go to that, did you know we have spies in the British camp? Did you know we have black spies in the British camp? Yes. One of which is a gentleman named James Armistead, which later on would add one extra name to his name in honor of the person he's spying for, James Armistead Lafayette. He would hear information that the British are going to go to Yorktown. He would smuggle it out of the camp and get it to Lafayette. Lafayette and Washington would make a plan to surround the British at Yorktown. But Cornwallis, he's no fool. He builds fortifications around the city. Why? Because it doesn't want us to bring our heavy cannons close enough to bombard the city. We have to take out 2 of those fortifications before we can get close enough to bombard the city. The first couple attempts don't really work well. We attack the city, we get thrown back, attack, get thrown back. Finally, we start digging trenches towards the city. Washington ends up calling on one of his best regiments, the Rhode Island Regiment. They're sent in with their guns unloaded, bayonets fixed, and they take their objective, according to a historian back then named Benson Lawson, in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The French take out the other one. We bring up our heavy cannons. We commence with the bombardment of the city, which eventually leads to the surrender of the British. This is where we win the war. By the end of the war, 10 to 25% of Washington's army would be people of color. Now, I told you that the British, pretty much the maneuver that Lord Dunsmore made was not as much that he was in favor of abolishing slavery or he had a great love for the black person. In fact, there's a couple of things that happened. During that Battle of Yorktown, the blacks that had been fighting with him, they started running low on supplies as the city was under siege. And Cornwallis was starting to think, who can we get rid of here to kind of stretch our supplies? Those blacks that had been fighting for him were driven out of the city, which was really quite a big problem for them, because if they come to the American side, since they're traitors, they're just going to be captured, if not killed, and sold as slaves again. If they go back, they're going to be shot. So it doesn't bode well for them at all. Many of them ended up waiting out the battle, basically in between the lines. What a horrible situation. There was another time when there was a group of blacks that were following the Redcoat Army. And unfortunately, there was an outbreak of disease. I think it was smallpox. What did the Redcoats do? They brought them to an island. Then they left them on that island. Over 300 of them to die of this disease. What a horrible thing. So, not necessarily that they had a great love for us, per se. Although I got to give them their credit again. Many of them kept their word. Some of their officers, some of them would seized some of the slaves and put them back into bondage because a lot of them had holdings down in the Caribbean area. They had a monopoly on sugar and they had sugar plantations. And so they basically re-enslaved some of them. But on the overall, they did keep their word. In fact, one of the meetings between General Washington and one of the people that was in charge of removing the British forces, I'm going to say Charles Carls. I can't remember the gentleman's name on the British side, but Washington came demanding that their property be returned back to him. The Brit said, "Of course, we'd be glad to return your property." They look over at the slaves. Oh, well, at this point, they're no longer property. You see, they fought for us and now they're free. So they didn't return them. And in fact, the record that the Brits had, they had called the Book of Negroes, where they had records of the blacks that they loaded up and transported to other places. Now, I'd like to go back a couple notches to where we were entrapped up at Brooklyn Heights in New York. And the Marbleheaders came in and rescued them, and other sailors came in and rescued them. That's a curious thing because I think it might have given spawn to a plan that Washington made later on. In fact, a plan that was executed at this very site, Washington's Crossing. Washington makes a plan to cross the Delaware and go 5 miles down towards Trenton and attack the Hessians. And it would be Glover and his regiment that would be in charge of getting Washington and his army across a ice-packed, a day much probably like today, snowy, cold, horrible. I mean, Washington is in a really bad situation. He, in fact, is begging his men who have the right to go home to a nice, warm home, food, comfort, family, wife. He's begging them, please stay on. Stay with me. And I think it says a lot about Washington that many of these men do. I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest statements about the character of Washington himself. Because if anybody is going to know a person, a bunch of soldiers going to know their commanders. And like I said, many of them stay. And so they take them across. In fact, here I've got a quotation that I would love to read to you from the event of Washington's Crossing. If you'll bear with me, please. See. Okay, here it is. As Henry Knox would later recall, I wish the members of this body knew the people of Marblehead as well as I do. I wish they had stood on the banks of the Delaware in 1776 in that bitter night when the commander-in-chief had drawn up his little army to cross it and had seen the powerful current bearing onward the floating masses of ice, which threatened destruction to whomever should venture upon its bosom. I wish that when the currents threatened to defeat the enterprise, they could have heard the distinguished warrior demand, "Who will lead us on?" and seen the men of Marblehead and Marblehead alone stand forth to lead the army along the perilous path to unfading glory and honor in the achievement of Trenton. There, sir, went the fishermen of Marblehead, alike at home upon land or water, alike ardent patriot and unflinching whenever they unfurl the flag of the country. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that amazing? And not only did these sailors, not only did they take them across the river, they made that march all the way down to Trenton and helped fight in that battle. So you kind of get a sense of what an important part that these blacks played in the fight for independence. Well, you're probably wondering why I'm telling you all of this. Saying, well, Mr. Hector, that's all fine and dandy, but what does that mean to me? Let me tell you what it means to you. First of all, General Washington doesn't win many battles. Let's pretend he fights 10 battles. Out of 10 battles, guess how many he wins? 2, 3, maybe. Not many. Now, you take away 10%, 25%, a quarter of his army. What do you think the chances of him winning are now? They're not too good, are they? So, here's what I want you to know. You who are sitting there today, enjoying the freedoms that you're enjoying today, are enjoying them in part because a lot of black people were in the fight and died so that you might be free. Do you hear me? I can't hear you. Do you hear me? Oh, you can't talk to me back. But you do hear what I'm saying. General Washington, I think later on he becomes a person that appreciates what the blacks did. I think it kind of surprised him. He probably didn't have high expectations. During our time, a lot of people thought that we blacks lacked certain virtues, certain abilities, like the ability to be intelligent, the ability to be courageous, the ability to be civil and civilized. There are even people that lived during this time who believe not only do we not have these traits, but we cannot form these traits. People like Thomas Jefferson, for instance. He doesn't believe that a black person could really be equal to a white person. Well, in schools, our children, they learn about American history and they learn about African American history. But there are some people that believe that these two have nothing to do with each other. They think they're mutually exclusive. Is that so? Not at all. My friends, African American history is American history. And you know what? I don't care what country you come from. I don't care what cultural background you are. I don't care what your customs are. If you are an American, you share in African American history because these people helped you to be free. Now, a man comes down the line. Thank you. A man comes down the line and he hears, he comes down the line and he gets his arms around this concept. And he comes up with a motto for our country. E pluribus unum. It's Latin, but you know, even middle schoolers understand what it means. Pluribus, or plural. What does it mean? Many, more than one. Unum, uno, one. Roughly translated, it means the many that become one. Can you think of a better description of us Americans? Think about it. The Irish, the African, the German, the French, the Spanish, the Scottish, the Polish, all these different nationalities, all these different type of people combining to make one nation, one people, Americans, us. Our power has always been in our diversity. You know what? It always will be in our diversity. It's just a shame. It's just a shame, my friend, that we really don't appreciate each other the way that we really should. And that, my fellow Americans, my friends, is what I want you to walk away with from this. I mean, I've enjoyed being here talking with you. But if it was a matter of just having enjoyment or hearing just another something being talked about, well, you know, that's okay, but it really doesn't accomplish a lot. But if we walk away with a greater appreciation of each other, we've really done something then. That is what I want to see. That's what I hope has been accomplished. Well, I guess I got a little carried away, didn't I? I do feel very strongly about this, because for so long, so many Black people they went without any proper credit for what they had done to help our country to become free. And it's just only right that, you know, they be given the honor that they deserve. And myself, I feel honored to be able to take and do this. I'm hoping that maybe from the beyond, they're looking at us now and maybe smiling and grinning and thinking, yeah, what we did was worth it. Well, I guess I better wrap this up. I don't want to go over. I'm very likely to do that. My dear.
Thank you so much, Noah. Everybody, people are putting in the chat how they appreciate the work that you're doing and how much they enjoyed your presentation. We have a question. What percentage of the Marblehead Regiment was African American?
I don't know the exact percentage. I know that it was largely Black, but if it comes to an exact number, I can't give that to you. I don't know that. I do know this, that during this time, that a lot of us Blacks chose to become sailors because being out on the sea and on a boat gave a lot more equalities than being on land and in the town. On a boat, everybody got to pull their weight, and you depend on everybody else. And when you had like things like privateers, which one of the richest men in Philadelphia, James Forden, he ended up starting off as a privateer. That's a polite way of saying a legal pirate. And they would take and divide, when they would take a ship, they would divide it up among the crew, and you could take and pretty much make your fortune out on sea. So the Marbleheaders, you know, were very good with this. I got to say, it kind of strikes me they probably were pretty put off that they were brought as sailors and they were turned into soldiers. That they probably meant to be more of the sailors end of things. That's probably what they were looking for. But
right.
You know, it is unquestionable what they contributed to, you know, our cause. During this particular time at Washington's Crossing, they call this like the 10 crucial days. Can you imagine if they weren't there? I mean, could we have pulled off Trenton? Could we have done that? I mean, Trenton was where we finally won our first significant battle. We finally had France come into the war. I mean, it was a significant time, and the Marbleheaders are part of that. But unfortunately, I can't give you an exact number.
Yeah, right. I know with Franklin being in Paris at this point, that he is trying to give the king any reason to to help us, and any victory that can be achieved was certainly chalked up, if you will. We have another question. Where was Ned and Proctor's artillery in between the Battle of Germantown and Valley Forge?
Germantown and Valley Forge. That's another one that I'm not sure of. Okay, the best that I can reconstruct it, I'm going to go a notch earlier. The Battle of Brandywine, obviously he was there. Then about 5 days later, he's in the Battle of the Clouds. I'm pretty sure about that, even though the record doesn't say it, I'm pretty sure he was in that. And then the army splits up. Part of them goes to Paoli. The other part goes to Yellow Springs. I think he went with the group that went to Yellow Springs. And then, you know, there's a lot of wandering around and, you know, other things that are happening. And then finally, Washington makes his plan for the attack at Germantown. And I know he is at Germantown, number one, because in his pension application that was turned down, he writes that he was both in the Battle of Brandywine and the Battle of Germantown. And we know that Proctor is there from the various accounts. In fact, over at, where is that picture at? I want to say that it's over at Clifton, but I'm not absolutely sure. I think it's at Clifton. There's a picture of 4 cannons bombarding the Chew House. That is Proctor's artillery. And literally, I love that picture, that painting, because it is a point of view that Ned would have had attacking that house. You see the 4 cannons and then bombarding, and it's exactly what Ned would have seen if he was there. And so after Germantown, they withdraw. You got White Marsh going on and some other stuff. And then they went around, and finally they start heading towards Valley Forge. Now, I don't have any records that he's at Valley Forge, but I do know that later on, after the war, he goes to live at a place called Conshohocken. It's a village of Conshohocken. Conshohocken doesn't exist during this time. It doesn't come into existence till around 1850. But I wouldn't be surprised if he might have been living in that general area, maybe. And as a Teamster, if he would have been at Valley Forge, I mean, if you had a choice between living at Valley Forge or going home, which Conshohocken is about 5 miles away from Valley Forge approximately, what would you choose? I think he probably went home. That's my opinion. I know he's still in the Army because I've got a record saying that he's picking up mortar shells from one of the furnaces in 1780. So he's still transporting things, and he's still working with the artillery.
Alrighty, another question. Why didn't Washington let the Black people who fought for him be free like the British did?
Ooh, we're getting into a whole nother presentation here. I've got a whole presentation on Washington and the slave soldiers.
All right, give us the back of the book cover version.
Well, General Washington, where does he come from? Virginia. What is he? He is a Southerner. The Southern culture is very dependent on slavery, but also the Northern culture is too. There are plantations up here. There are slaves up in the North as well. Now, if you take those slaves and you free them, a lot of people are going to go under because they're not going to have the workforce to take and be able to support what they're doing. Slavery works on this principle. Basically, somebody else does all the work and you get all the profit. And when that is taken away, people don't make the money that they hope to make. So, it would have been a good idea if they would have done that. And in some cases, they did. Up in Rhode Island, the government actually bought some of the slaves, and so that they could take and do service in the military. They bought them from their masters and then gave them the freedom. Some got it, some didn't. There were other masters who offered their slaves freedom if they would go in place as a substitute for them. When they got back home, maybe they got their freedom, maybe they didn't. There's a gentleman named Samuel Stuffton. He started off, I think, around the age of 17 or something like that. He went out as a substitute, and then when he came back, his master reneged on him. Not only did he renege on him, he sold him again, and he got sold again. And finally, by the age of 70, he finally was given his freedom. So it was a very tenuous situation that was going on in America. I think that the British, it was kind of like one of their last big poking eyes to America, that they were willing to take and free the slaves. Again, I don't think they had a particular love for the Black person, but it was a way of kind of getting back at the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, and it was very conditional.
Yes.
Dunmore's proclamation. It was, you had to be enslaved by a quote unquote rebel and then come to fight for the British. And they were the only ones who qualified for freedom.
Yes.
And his Ethiopian regiment ends up, within a year or so, it is riddled with, was it smallpox or illness?
Not only that, they were just about wiped out in a battle.
Yes.
They pretty much are decimated.
Right. So we have another question. Well, do maybe two more questions. One is actually an interesting question regarding interpretation and 2026. And it's the broader question here is, should we be telling the stories of Blacks who fought for the British?
Yes, it's part of the history. I I am not necessarily one of those who advocate tearing down all the icons, like historical markers and thing. I am one who advocates, let's tell the whole story. So we've had people who had less than a stellar type of life, at least in relationship to race. I think the whole story should be told about them. So, because if you're not telling any story, no one's learning anything. So let's tell the whole story, and let's tell about British. And curious side note on that. Did you know that there was a British ship that came near where Washington lived, and about 13 of his slaves jumped ship, and I think one of them actually ends up in Yorktown fighting against Washington. There. So it's a very curious way that things go in war.
And a final question, and I know that there are more in the chat than we're able to get to. So I put, again, in the beginning of the chat, Noah's contact information, and you should feel free to reach out to him. But the question is there a record of the enslaved people who fought for the American side, and which would detail where they were from? And I think it's a larger question on research, and that was something I was going to ask you about your research methodology.
Yeah, that's the problem. There weren't really good records that were kept, and not only that, we've got a lot of our history that doesn't come directly from the colonial period. It comes through the Victorians, and by the time of the Victorians, their attitude was basically Blacks are animals. And, so they don't really tell much about what Blacks did during that period of time. So, there's not a lot of records that you're able to find. Sometimes even names are not dependable to use to take and try to figure out if a person was Black or not. One of the biggest assets are sometimes the mustard rolls. Like on mustard roll, they call Ned Hector a person of color. I find that sometimes you can look them up on their census records, and they will say sometimes this was a colored person or a Black person. You can take and look up their pension records. Their pension record, when they make an application, a lot of times they will mention, I was a Black person that fought for my freedom. See, there are various records that you can research and get a little hint to maybe what these people, who they were. But to come at Black history, colonial Black history, solely by only documentation really doesn't, you can't really do that, because there's just not enough records that will give enough information. So, there's a lot of reading between the lines that you have to do.
Yeah, I agree. And the research I've done, looking at pension records and muster rolls, it becomes easier if the person has been identified. Their race has been identified. But if it hasn't, which is also often the case, it's often impossible to tell by somebody's name. And if you can, I like your idea of going back and forth and comparing with census records, but then again, it's also very difficult if the gentleman's name was John and had a common last name. It doesn't help. So it is really a challenge. But with that, I want to thank you very much, Noah, for your presentation. You're getting rave reviews here, and this is a topic that is getting more visibility now, and that's a wonderful thing, and we want to continue to add to that. What I will say to our group before we sign off here is I encourage you to look at WashingtonCrossingPark.org, which is the park's a website for the park. It's run by the Friends group, and they have a calendar of events there, and you can see the lectures that we're going to be doing for 2021. The April 11th lecture, which is the next one coming up, will be with author Christian McBurney, and he's going to be discussing his new book on Charles Lee. He was supposed to be here at the park in 2020, but well, you know what happened with all of that. So that will be a virtual presentation. The other ones, as I mentioned before we started, are up in the air as to whether or not they will be virtual or in person. We're playing it by ear and seeing what's the best and safest way to proceed with that, but there will be something. Also, we have a book club that meets every month, and right now we're meeting virtually, and we do not conquer an entire book in a month. We break it into sections so that it's digestible, and we can kind of get in the weeds and discuss everything that that the historian is talking about. So again, WashingtonCrossingPark.org on the events site. And with that, I will say,
Kim,
oh yes, go right ahead.
before you go off, I want to express a appreciation to Washington's Crossing on a whole. I like to say we've been interacting for almost 20 years. I had found an openness there at Washington's Crossing when I started doing this, doing these presentations. You know, eventually the relationship between us, you know, I was able to take and help with putting up some displays. You all were open to doing displays about Blacks during the colonial period. You were open to, in your program book, putting in articles about Blacks and their contribution. You made a lot of times the big effort to take and try to be inclusive. And I just wanted to personally thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. And, you know, we, as you said earlier, we want to tell the history, and you're not really doing that if you don't talk about all of the people who are there. So we talk about people of color. We talk about camp followers and women who were part of the Army. We haven't forgotten the ladies. And as a matter of fact, a lecture that I do every December, and to tie in with the reenactment, is called "Who Was Here?" And I highlight maybe 5 or 6 different individuals who crossed or were part of the 10 crucial days. And you know, we know the stories of the generals, or they're at least easy to find, and I try to put a spotlight on some of the people that perhaps you haven't heard of before. And so, you know, I know it's quite a while from now, but keep that in mind too. And with that, I will say thank you all for joining us on this snowy but beautiful day. Goodbye.
Take care. Kim, before you go,
Right.
let everybody go ahead and let them leave.